Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com for premium picks. Look us up in the sports section on Roku. We're there. Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Talk to the gamblers around you, and you'll find out that the best bets you can make, the ones in fact you'll enjoy the most, are the bets you have in your head before the game or the boxing match is even announced, right? Just as you watch sports, you get a read on the lay of the land and you say to yourself, okay, I know that if this team plays that team, I'm going to be with this team, right? If this guy fights that guy, I'm going to be with this guy. This is even before the odds are announced, right? At that point, you're just thinking to yourself, what odds are the casino going to give me, right? So, for example, just outside the ring here, on December the 12th, 2013, assuming everyone stays healthy, because the world changes if guys get injured, I can't wait to bet on the Seattle Seahawks in the playoffs, right? Should San Francisco, the local team here in Northern California, should San Francisco play the Seahawks a third time this season, I can't wait to take the Seahawks. I just hope that the casino is stupid enough to give me 3 points or less, right? Because I know, regardless of what happened this last weekend, and by the way, San Francisco beat Seattle this last weekend, I know that Pete Carroll, Richard Sherman, Russell Wilson will be ready the next time, right? Also in basketball, I can't wait for the playoffs. I can't wait to take the Indiana Pacers when they get to that intersection against LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and yes, Greg Oden. Right? Now, maybe Greg Oden shows up and looks like the first pick of the draft. Oden has skills, right? But I'm going to take my chances. Again, right? Barring injury, right? If Paul George gets hurt, then I'm backing away from the table. But if Indiana is healthy, count me in, right? I think the Pacers get by the Heat, and I'm not talking about a series that takes place for several months. Well, in boxing, you come across fighters who you know are better than some of the champions out there, right? I know I upset a lot of people here online. A lot of people think I'm crazy and that I prove it when I say things like, I consider James DeGale to be better than Carl Froch. By the way, I have for quite some time. Go through the videos here online. DeGale doesn't have a belt right now. Well, let's just say this. Especially after this match, Erislandy Lara against Austin Trout. You know what? That person you'll see rushing into the casino to stand in line the minute a Lara-Saul Alvarez fight is announced, right? If he has a bald head and looks a little chunky, just assume it's me, because I'll be taking Lara in that fight, right? If Lara, and he fights at 154, decides that he wants the belt at 160, and decides to challenge either Peter Quillin or Felix Sturm, count me among those who believes Lara wins those fights, right? Sometimes people here online say, Dwyer, how long does it take you to pick a winner in a fight? And the answer is sometimes a couple of seconds. Because in my head, I've already thought about Lara against Felix Sturm, right? And I understand that public sentiment changes based on recent fights. In other words, Felix Sturm did look spectacular against Darren Barker. So right now, if you're a Felix Sturm fan, and he's one of the belt holders at 160, you're riding high right now. All I'm here to say is that a guy 5'9" at 154 likely beats Felix Sturm. Right? In my opinion, styles make fights. You cannot fight a slow outside fight against Erislandy Lara and expect to beat him. Right? There are some fighters who can give Lara a hard time in his own weight class. I believe style-wise, he would have a hard time against James Kirkland. Right? We know style-wise, he has a hard time against Carlos Molina, who already fought Lara and fought him to a draw. Let me also point out, too, that it's amazing how fights change over time. Right? Just like people looked at the Lennox Lewis-Vitaly Klitschko fight way back when and didn't realize that that was one of the most important fights in heavyweight history. Right? At the time, Vitaly was viewed as an up-and-comer. We might have to look back at that Lara-Molina fight and ask ourselves how that fight went under radar. Right? Molina is a guy who I think beat Canelo way back when. Right? Not Canelo, excuse me. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Way back when. Right? Molina is a Jew who finally got a title. Well, before he got the title, he was fighting tough opponents, right? Chavez Jr., Erislandy Lara, and he was holding his own. Take a look at that Lara-Molina fight. Now, let me say this. There's something in boxing that's vague and ambiguous, and that doesn't involve actual punches landing, right? It's literally ring generalship, right? It's charisma in the ring. It's how a guy looks in the ring. I once made a video here talking about the charisma gap between Sugar Ray Leonard, right? Ray was charismatic beyond belief, right? Ray had an Ali type mysticism about him. And Floyd Mayweather, who's a great fighter, but who doesn't bring the crowd into the ring with him the way Ray Leonard did. And in that video, you could look it up, I made the argument that Floyd would have a hard time with Ray. Even though Floyd's the better defensive boxer and has, certain skills Ray doesn't have, Floyd would have a very hard time with Ray. Because Ray's elusive, Ray had foot movement, but more importantly, Ray Leonard is the kind of guy who, just based on charisma, would be able to win rounds. Right? If the round's close, you go for the guy you like. There's a likability with Ray Leonard. He just looked in the ring to be dominant. Now, what I want you to do is when you look at this Lara-Trout fight, in my opinion, above and beyond anything else that's going on, just look at the guys in the ring. Erislandy Lara just has more ring generalship. By that, I mean he just looks more in control than Austin Trout. This is even when they're doing the same things. I know this sounds touchy-feely, but he just has better balance. He just has better presence, right? Austin Trout looks nervous. Looks like he's moving a little bit. Has a little wiggle to him. Erislandy Lara has that rare gift where he is completely calm and looks completely still, regardless of what's happening around him. Right? He just looks in control. Now, people say, what does that matter if he's not landing punches? Folks, boxing's like figure skating. You got judges on the side of the ring. They're scoring the fight. The first 4 rounds of this fight are close, in my opinion, action-wise. right? I didn't see either fighter really get that much of an advantage. But as I looked on my scorecard, I kept scoring the rounds for Erislandy Lara, because Lara just looked like he was doing what he wanted to do more than Trout did, even though they were doing the same things. As I said, Trout looks nervous. He's moving a little bit. Trout looks a bit frustrated. Maybe Erislandy Lara privately inside is nervous and frustrated. It doesn't show. He looks like a guy who has the fight unfolding exactly the way he wants it to, right? Better balance, better body control, absolutely great spacing, right? Lara seems to be able to control distance against opponents who themselves aren't smotherers. I don't believe he was able to control distance against Alfredo Angulo in his last fight. I believe James Kirkland would certainly run a lot of red lights and be right up on Erislandy Lara. Right? I don't believe he could control distance in that fight. But against technicians who are trying to work their way in, like Austin Trout was, he controlled distance. And he looked like Fred Astaire out there. Let me just say this. The head movement is spectacular. What I want you to do is to just look at Lara. Master of distance. Head movement isn't all neck and shoulders. It's knowing where you're going to roll as you throw stuff. Let me say this. Lara knows Trout so well that Lara, and they're both southpaws, Lara would land a straight right hand right over Trout's shoulder. And then he would raise his hands up like this and back away. No panic. Here he is against Austin Trout, an excellent fighter, a former world champion. And he knew, based on positioning, he knew, based on where Trout was positioned, that after he landed his shot, he could back away with his hands up, fully exposed, knowing that Trout couldn't hit him. Right? It's very hard to hit Lara flush. He moves too well. He bends at the waist. He's reading the angles constantly. And he looks calm doing it. This fight opens with Trout searching for Lara's body. Couldn't find it. Trout actually is bent over a bit, trying to fight small. All that did was give Lara an opportunity to come over the top with straight left hands. Right? Lara's a guy who, if you give him an opening, he takes the opening. He's the kind of defensive wizard who doesn't have to have his hands up the entire fight or even 50% of the fight. He's watching you, he's turning, he's leaning his head. Right? In other words, the head movement isn't even quick head movement. He's not reacting to every punch. No, he has it set up where he knows this guy has to come across his body to hit me. So I'll just hit him and then I'll just arc my body like this. I don't have to worry about the punch landing. Right? This is high-level stuff. Al Bernstein had at least as good a night as Lara did. And he pointed out that Trout was actually trying to be a lead puncher. That Trout, this was a fight between two counterpunchers. And Trout was actually trying to be a lead puncher, trying to get inside, trying to smother Lara. But we know that's not who Austin Trout is. So Trout starts getting hit with clean punches. The knockdown late in the fight catches Trout by surprise to the point where I want you to look at Trout's legs when he hits the canvas. He almost does a split. He's completely unprepared for the punch. This isn't the Canelo knockdown where Trout gets hit from distance and seems to know what's going on, staggers a little bit before hitting the canvas. This is different. Gets hit on the side of the head here, goes down immediately. His feet unprepared for it. Right? Lara views himself as a puncher. But yet, he's such a technician that he's not in a rush to show you the punch. Right? So this is an elite level guy. I think he beats Canelo. I think there's what the public believes, and then there's the hard truth of what's really going on. I consider Lara better than Canelo, right? Frankly, based on my scorecard, I thought this was the first fight Trout lost. I thought Trout beat Canelo, but I certainly believe that Lara against Canelo, that fight's a mismatch, in my opinion. Right? I believe Lara right now can beat several champs out there. Peter Quillin, Felix Sturm. I'm not so sure about Carlos Molina, who already fought him and gave him all he can handle. Right? If Lara signs up to fight a guy who's an outside fighter or who lacks foot speed, you need to take Lara in that fight. He simply moves too well and is too precise with his counterpunching to lose to someone like that. Right? The kind of person who would give him problems is a higher volume guy. Lara's lower volume. It's a higher volume guy who would get in and turn it into a grappling contest. Right? Or the kind of guy who is a destabilizer. Right? The guy who just beat Chris John. Right? Another type guy, Jorge Arce. These are guys who duck their head and throw punches from big-time, weird, looping angles that you can't duplicate in a training camp. That's the kind of guy who might be able to give Lara a hard time. Not a guy like Trout, who's outside shooting a jab that can't land. Right? I mean, just look at how effortlessly Lara backs away from the jab that Trout's shooting. Right? Trout's game is made for slower-footed opponents. Not a guy like this who's playing a three-dimensional game, right? You know, Lara is upright, then Lara's down low, then Lara's leaning. He's actually better than he looks on film. Right? At the highest level, boxing's about angles. This guy has the angles down pat. Right? Only a guy who can smother him and overpower him, or at least wrestle with him with some slickness like Carlos Molina did, can give Lara a hard time. I believe he beats everyone else. Lara Gennady Golovkin would be an interesting fight, because Golovkin would have to be on his front foot trying to smother Lara behind a guard. And Lara was down twice against Alfredo Angulo. In other words, Golovkin certainly hits hard enough to put Lara down. That's a great fight at 160. But that's how good Lara is. To come up with great fights for him, you have to think about the best in the division above him. Also, let me point out too, don't be obsessed with weight, because both Lara and Trout are guys who routinely gain 10 to 15 pounds between the weigh-in and the night of the fight. Right? Lara actually walks around well into the 160s. And let me just say, with this skill set and this elusiveness, I don't see why he can't be competitive against guys at 168 pounds. Food for thought. The Lara story is going to have many more chapters. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Thanks for stopping by.